Good evening to all. I think it's a different beginning today, which is ending something at one stage. We have been talking during this pandemic with regards to lot of technology usage and lot of new activities which we have come across, and particularly a country like India, which has adopted technology to the last level. The volume speaks everything. And I think the adoption, which ensured that the country moves continuously forward, is the answer to the entire success of use of technology. It doesn't end there. Today, we have a very interesting discussion with regards to the structured data and its importance in the governance mechanism. Friends, really, it is a great evening because we have such learned professionals along with me today to share their views and experiences across and a country, ICAI, particularly the second largest accounting body, which is seeing this data, structured data in a total different format. With us, we have Honorable President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, Mr. Atul Gupta, who is actually going to share his views, along with Honorable Vice President of the Institute, Nihar Jambusaria, and the most important part, Mr. John Turner, who is the CEO of XBRL India. XBRL India, I think, was waiting for this kind of time, an opportunity to come. Yeah, XBR International, which was looking, I'm sorry, my apology, I've been working on the India side, so I always talk India, but I think I for India, I for International both stand same. So I think XBRL International was looking for such kind of opportunity where data, how important it will become, and the usage of the data will be making relevance. We have actually come to that stage of adopting that entire process. So we have John along with us, who is going to be the keynote address, and most importantly, Mr. MP Vijay Kumar, who is a Central Council member and the chairman of Accounting Standard Board, who is going to share his views on different aspects, and a person who has been party to design the Digital Accounting and Assurance Board, along with Atul Gupta ji. Friends, I don't want to talk more about this, but I would like to listen from the leaders how we can take it forward and move forward. I request our Honorable Vice President, C.A. Nihar Jambusaria sir, to come and give his opening remark. Over to you, VP sir.
Thank you, Dej. Honorable President of the Institute, C.A. Atulji. Today's speakers, John and Council Member CMP Vijay Kumar, Dayanivas Sarmaji, who is organizing this program, and all the viewers. I think for all, it is necessary to know that today data has become new age oil for all of us. And if we take a lot of time in arranging, rearranging data, then we hardly get time for its analysis. And therefore, a very structured data availability is the need of the day. XBRL is the language in which the data can be made available in structured form, and its utility is known to all, particularly in COVID time, to analyze where the hotspots lie, hospital capacity, availability of ventilators. All this was organized through structured data. And had somebody tried manually, it would have been extremely difficult to handle the COVID-19 situation in terms of addressing the health issues of people. Apart from this, the governments have started using XBRL language and structured data for the purpose of analysis, and we realize that over the last couple of years, the government has made analysis of data from this structured available data in such a way that they have very extensively come out with the advanced level of understanding of data. For investors, users, for stakeholders, understanding this language and having structured data is very important. And today we have two extremely good speakers to discuss this governance at structured data, how with structured data the governments one can be at the on the top of governance. Thank you for organizing this program, and to the two speakers for coming forward to address the gathering. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice President. It's actually an insightful thing. To start with, it was a good opening. Now I welcome our Honorable President C. Atul Gupta ji to give his opening remarks.
Thank you, Dayanima Sharma ji, the Honorable Vice President ICAI, CA Nihar Niranjan Jambu Saria ji, the CEO of XBRL International, a close friend of mine, John Turner, my esteemed council colleague CA MP Vijay Kumar, and all my distinguished viewers, the various stakeholders. A very good evening to all of you, and let me welcome all of you on behalf of the ICAI and even on the behalf of the XBRL International, being the John is there, who is the CEO of the XBRL International, which is not only a global organization, but also having the reach at the nook and corner of the world, and rendering the very, very important services, I will say, on that particular aspect. Friends, as far as the today's topic is concerned, and the theme of this particular webinar, which is being organized today, that is the structured data at the rate governance, meaning thereby that when we talk about the governance per se, how the structured data can be a very, very important tool, or I will say that the fuel into the entire process, that which facilitate the energy, which facilitate the overall governance environment in one or the other jurisdiction. As we are aware that when we talk about the jurisdiction, the governance aspect per se, it is not only that we are discussing about the one jurisdiction or the other jurisdiction. All the jurisdiction have the similar kind of challenges. May it be the governance related to the sustainability, the governance in relation to the, I will say, the environment, the governance in relation to the growth. So whenever you are discussing anything about the governance, so it's not only that when we are talking about the governance, it is only that we are looking towards the corporate governance per se. But when we talk about the sustainable development goals, when we talk about the corporate social responsibility, it is something that the governance is required. That even when we are rendering these services to the society through the various utilities, then also the governance is required. Now, when we are aware that when we talk about the governance per se, which is a very wide topic which encompasses the n number of things within that, it is very important that how you will achieve the governance. Now, when we are looking for the achieving the governance per se, you require some kind of information in a more structured environment, so that you can take the effective decision making. You can do a better decision making by using that data, by using that information. Now, when you are having the problem statement well set, you are aware about the probable solution of the same. The only point is that you have to arrange the ingredient of that particular aspect, and that is something the data. So that's why is rightly mentioned by the Honorable Vice President, the data is the new oil. But somebody told me, no, it is not the new oil. It is even the new water. So because the next challenge will be not about the oil. There will be the company like X or Y, which will come with the battery operated or the electric vehicles. But what about the water? So when we talk about the data, which is a new oil or a new water, again, it is something that we need to understand, that in case you have to take the better decisions, to have the better governance, if you have to have the better strategy to have the better governance, it is very important that you are getting the data not only in a structured environment, but also a data which can be compared, which can facilitate the analysis on the part of the one or the other regulator. And that's why we have arranged this particular program, that how we can have a structured data. what are the ingredients of the structured data, how you can achieve the structured data, and then how to use that structured data for the number of decisions you are looking for. And that's why we are understand that it is something that we have to work for the structured data. And that's why we requested the John, that who is the CEO of the XBRL International, just to be a keynote speaker and deliberate on this particular important aspect, that how the global jurisdictions can have the more and more data in a structured environment for the better decision making. So when we talk about the one or the other language which talks about the structured data, it is not that we are looking for a formats. It is not the language we are talking about. It is something we are talking about the standards, that how you can have the structured data in a standardized environment, in a standardized format, and in a language of the standard. So that is something is very, very important for all of us to understand. Now, when we are aware about this, there are the important users of the standard structured data as well. You talk about the any global economy, you talk about the any nation, there are the large number of nations which are having the data, structured data, not only on the financial landscape, but also the non-financial data. Let us take an example when we talk about the corporate social responsibility and how much water is being used for the, say for example, one or the other purposes by the industry. That is something, if you are able to capture, you can always have a plan to replenish that particular natural resource by having the strategy available through the regulator per se. In India, even the data, the structured data is being planned not only by the ICAI, through the MCA, by creating the taxonomies where the companies are filing the returns in the XBRL environment. Even the RBI, even the other regulators are using the taxonomies and the methodology to take the structured data from the various constituent of that particular regulator. So I believe that with this background, when the John will be giving a keynote address, which will be, I believe, a very, very important, valuable address for all of us, for a way forward, that how we can, not only in India, but also the other jurisdiction can take the benefit of the structured data for the purpose of the governance, may it be for the environment, may it be for the sustainability, may it be for the growth, that we used to call the ESG. And it will be, I will say, for times to come, it will be a new learning for each one of us, and will be something that we need to develop a way forward based on this keynote address. So friends, I believe that after the John, MP Vijay Kumar and Dayan Nivas Sharma ji will be speaking on the Indian perspective and how we are looking into this particular structured data and the utility thereof. And that will be a very, very important learning for all of us. So let us have a happy, I convey the best wishes to all the speakers and have a happy learning. Over to Dea Bhai for the requesting John to speak with.
Thank you, President. I think one of the most interesting, and you have put forward the 360-degree view of India as such. And I think the most important part, as you rightly said, it is data, oil, or water, or what kind of food it is going to be for the consumption. It's going to be a different challenge. And the most important part in the entire process, the more the data, the more decision making is there, but the more risk also is attached to it. And John, I think the most important part is we have actually coined this program as governance at structured data. But I think it also should be governance and transparency with the structured data, which is something which is very, very important. Friends, today we have a very learned person who is actually driving the XBRL International with a different passion. And I'm really happy that a person like him, who's actually been part of this global thought process, who's today going to come and share how this structured data is going to be very important and how XBRL is playing a very important role in the process. Before I welcome John to come and give his keynote address, let me just quickly take you through his profile. Very short, very quick, very punchy, very effective. John leads XBRL International, the non-profit standard development organization behind XBRL, the business reporting data exchange standard. He works with regulators, government, and the private sector to help the shift from paper-based to data-centric reporting paradigm. I think this is where we all are moving towards in this last 6 to 8 months. It's going to be very interesting, John, to listen to you. I think the thought process you have gone through, it's going to be something impressive, and we know, what kind of challenges you might have faced to convince from paper-based to a data-centric approach. He has been involved in XBRL standards in the number of different capacities since 1999. Prior to taking one of his current role, at the end of 2013, he served as the CEO of Core Filing, an XBRL software firm. Before that, he led the global XBRL activities of KPMG LLP, and prior to that, worked as a prudential regulator, running off-site surveillance and leading the revamp of data collection system, APRA. I don't know what it means in Australia, but I think the message is very clear. If the regulators are going to look into these aspects and this data, if it is rightly used, I think the kind of decision making the governments can take with regards to collection of taxes, planning their budgets and everything is going to be something marvelous. He is passionate advocate for the pragmatic use of standard to enhance reporting, and with the staff of XBRL International work with the consortium members and leading regulators around the world to this end. Based in Oxford in the United Kingdom, he holds degree in law and arts from the University of Queensland with major in computer science and government. I think this is a unique degree which you have got. Yes, data technology is an art rather than a system which is there. John, we welcome you to India for giving your keynote address. And I think I'm individually really excited to understand the kind of journey you have gone through to convince not only the users, but also the users who are actually preparing the financial statements to come into a particular structured manner. So look forward from hearing to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, and also to my friend Atul, Mr. President, and all the other speakers today. Thank you very much for the very kind welcome and this opportunity to share with you a few thoughts this evening. Welcome one and all to this audience in India and around the world to discuss some of these questions around structured data and governance. I'm just going to share my screen here and we'll get going. So I trust you can see my screen now. I'm sure somebody will tell me if you can't. So we're just going to run through some slides and they'll be available and made available to ICAI later on. So if you would like to refer back, please do. As you kindly said in the introduction, I've been involved in this standard and a number of other standards for far too long. But this is something that has become something of a passion for many people around the world. The XBRL standard was developed largely by the American Institute of CPAs. So this is something that has been accounting-led from the very beginning. But the AICPA very quickly understood that if this was going to become a truly global standard, then it would need to be global. It could not be based out of the AICPA or based out of the United States. So spun it out quite quickly way back in 2001. But this has been a slow process and understandably so. We are in fact dealing with government agencies at the very core of government. We are dealing with professionals right around the world who have the serious business of not just making money, but looking after other people's money. So we don't want people to rush into change. But nevertheless, this idea of moving away from a paper paradigm to a data paradigm is an idea that has taken hold around the world. As of yesterday, actually, we're up to 181 regulators around the world that mandate the use of the XBRL standard for collecting information of varying kinds from regulated companies. So that creates a number of things. One of the things it creates is a lot of knowledge and understanding about this, not least in India, where there are some very important actors and people and companies in this space. But that process is something that impacts vendors, it impacts professional accountants, and other people involved in the preparation of financial and other information, and ESG is something we'll come back to. But that process is also clearly impacts an awful lot of companies. Our estimate at present is that it covers something like 30 million companies around the world, and that this is opening up and making more transparent the activities of many of those companies, and where that information is made public, other information is always held privately and is helping to inform and improve the decision-making of regulators in various capacities. XBRL is used for lots of things. As you're aware, in India, it is used by not just the two main exchanges for collecting information from public companies, but it's used by MCA to collect information from a significant number of larger private companies. It's also used very importantly in bank supervision by the RBI in India. And that's a nice example of the kinds of ways that the standard gets used in different parts of the world. Indeed, it is used for very, very significantly by securities regulators, by business registrars, by financial regulators of all kinds, but also by statistics agency, by tax authorities, and increasingly it's used at a government-wide level to try to improve as a national asset reporting and the quality of information that is available for decision-making of all kinds. Some of the very exciting developments that are occurring in this space are actually all within the private sector that are making use of taxonomies and other digital assets to improve existing processes for credit provision, for risk rating, for analysis of supply chains and other things of that nature. Today, I want to tell you just a little bit about XBRL International, which is a very small organization, which perhaps packs a punch above its weight, but is involved, as you've heard from the introduction, in the development of the technical standards, which are used by regulators and by others to facilitate the movement, that is the production, the review, the publication, and the analysis of structured business information in varying ways. Clearly, reporting occurs in different ways in different parts of the world, and therefore the XBRL International standards, which are technical specifications really aimed at the computer scientists and the systems architects that are developing their own reporting systems, XBRL provides a way for those regulators and others to define what they want to collect from regulated companies, which then allows companies to express their performance in different ways according to different regulations, or indeed their requirements. Today, I'd like to take you rather into the future. I'd like you to be thinking about some of the things that we can pretty much be certain is coming down the pipeline over perhaps the next decade. And I'd like you then to think about what that means for your organization, your business, your accounting practice, since we have many accountants on today's call, and indeed for policymakers and regulators. This is going to be a question of competitiveness and ensuring you're creating a competitive advantage at a national level, as well as the international linkages that reporting drives and supports. So let's get started with some of those ideas and see if these things will work through. So we're going to start off by thinking ahead and indeed thinking about this really very famous quote, which I'm sure you're all aware of, that comes from Bill Gates, these days the chairman of Microsoft. And it's very wise. For any of you who have lived through technological change, and let's face it, we all have. I mean, the iPhone and the smartphone has only existed for 12 years, which if you think about it, is just astonishing in the way that that has changed our lives. But in the first couple of years, Well, we probably all overestimated the way that was going to impact our lives. So Bill Gates's quote is that we always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years, and indeed we underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. So please come with me on a little journey to think about what changes are going to occur over the next decade as we continue to live in what is in reality a much more connected, a much more complex, and a much more interdependent region, state, country, and world. So if you'll bear with me, we've got a little black hole here, which has allowed us to escape through a little porthole in time and start to think about the world in 2031, even though we're just introducing ourselves to the idea of 2021. Let's just look back from the year 2031 to some of the things that we can be pretty confident will have occurred over the past decade. Indeed, here we have the very significant importance of cybersecurity. Even what we consider to be the most secure systems and the most secure organizations have already been hacked. They've been hacked by extremely clever and focused criminal enterprises. They've been hacked by state security services. That process is an ongoing war. It is something that involves everybody at every organization. If you are an employee at the very lowest level, it merely means you must not share your password, and you must indeed have a secure one. But as you move upwards inside organizations and across society, thinking about the impact of cybersecurity is incredibly important. We perhaps haven't had a truly global impact of cyber criminality, and it is sadly likely to be only a small amount of time before we see impact of cyber criminality impact us at a truly international scale. So cybersecurity over the next decade is going to become truly paramount. This is not just a question of keeping our systems secure, it's a question of trust, it's a question of privacy, and question about identity, and all of these things are truly interlinked. One of the things that I think that we can be almost certain of, and we're seeing questions in Europe and we're seeing questions now in the United States about the extraordinary market power and prevalence of internet platforms, which clearly are very significant monopolies. One of the things, and there are experiments in this field, there are small efforts in this field, but we can be very certain that this is something that will become much more important. If you haven't ever heard of the idea of self-sovereign identity, where you have a store of your own identity, whether that's a corporate or whether that's as an individual, and you let people access certain aspects of your identity for certain specific purposes. This is a vision that people like Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the internet, has had for a long time, but there are huge efforts going on in this space at present, and will no doubt have a very profound impact on the way we do business and the way that we interact with not just our corporate connections, but even our friends and families, as it changes the way that some of these social media and other platforms operate. So do have a look at the idea of Solid, which is an open source effort around personal online data stores, to understand some of those concepts. But be assured that cybersecurity will remain at the front of our minds. It will sit at the top of agendas in corporate boardrooms and government cabinet level decision making for a very long time. And data security will continue to be a very important part of all of our agendas over the next decade. Yes, indeed, data is the new oil, but as Mr. President has already described, it's much more important than that. What about some other things? We've all heard about cryptocurrencies and e-wallets and the like. Well, it's almost certain that these kinds of ideas are going to have a very important part of in our lives, both our personal lives and, for the purposes of this evening, our business lives. and indeed for regulators. So digital currency is likely to be something that impacts us in many different ways. And I'd like you to have a think about what that means, perhaps in we see lots of things about, oh, Bitcoin's going to take over the world, or digital currencies will replace our own currencies, and all kinds of things of that nature. Perhaps think about this in terms of a central estimate, which is that rather than Bitcoin taking over the world, it is much more likely that the utility of digital currencies will be understood by our societies, and indeed by our central banks, who are almost all, including in India, experimenting with the ideas of fiat digital currencies. So instead of being a bunch of libertarians in their basements, some of whom seem to have lost their password to hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoins, we are talking about properly structured, properly controlled frameworks for the exchange of value through purely digital means. Now, you might say, well, we do a lot of that already through e-banking and the like, and that's true. But this is going to become much more important and alter an awful lot of what we do in very significant ways. It will certainly alter the way that accounting works. If I can pay as a corporate one of my suppliers instantly without a bank intermediary, I can do so by exchanging e-currency that is my national currency directly. Sorry, where we are, there we are. Then that's going to change the way we record that transaction. It's going to change the way we think about our relationships in a new fashion. It will also alter the banking system significantly. And if you've not already spent time thinking about or looking at this, then I would urge you to do so. Because it will impact the way that your own organizations operate. And in particular, it would lead to new ways of thinking about trust. If you've not been following the trials and tribulations of Jack Ma and his colleagues at Alipay in China, then now would be a great time to do so. Not so much because the Chinese government has cracked down on what they are doing, and looking at that in terms of monopoly power and the like. Look at it in terms of the technology breakthrough that Alipay and its competitors are creating. So instead of thinking about trust purely from the idea of corporate analysis and financial analysis, Alipay, particularly through corporate accounts, has provided a way to move money. I'm buying some stationery, or I'm purchasing a car lease, all of which I can do with my Alipay digital wallet. And those transactions are recorded, and that granular information can be rolled up and processed to get a picture of individual organizations, and indeed, of course, the spending habits and the income habits of individuals, to get a much better idea of how trustworthy that organization might be. And that process really fundamentally alters things like lending decision making, because if I have not just the financial statements of a company that I might be deciding to lend to, but I actually have a very good idea about the income and expenditure of that company at a transactional and in near real time basis, which the idea of fiat digital currency, which I have little doubt will replace the ideas of things like Alipay, is something that is really going to alter the manner in which the world thinks and the world operates. So think about that in terms of connectivity. Think about that in terms of continuous reporting and monitoring. For as long as I've been in the workforce, there has been a small cadre of professional accountants working around the idea of continuous audit and continuous monitoring. Those ideas are coming to their fore. The idea of sampling will fall away over the next decade, and we can be very certain of that. We are going to be looking at every transaction. We are going to be pulling those things together in different ways, and the only way we can do that is really through structured data of one sort or another. It's not just the XBRL standard. There are other standards that are important in this space, but standards are critical to this because it is extremely unlikely, for monopoly reasons, that we're going to be putting all of this into, a social media platform or something that replaces it. We will, much more likely, the central estimate is that we will be doing these kinds of transactions, but those transactions will be done with fiat digital currency, and the way that we monitor and transact with those will no doubt be competing platforms, but all of which are reliant on standards to make that happen. That is not to say for a moment that reporting is not important. Reporting will continue to be important. In fact, reporting will become more important. So here's another headline for you to think about, made up, of course, but it's not that far away. The idea of artificial intelligence as a true aid to many of our activities is something that is coming into effect in many areas already, but is something that will become much more important as we move forward over the next decade. And we talk about AI as artificial intelligence, but really we shouldn't. We should talk about AI as augmented intelligence. It's providing us capabilities and recognizing patterns in particular that humans are unable to do alone, but by raising up those patterns and making them accessible to human analysis, we're able to do many more things. So some of the complexities that we all deal with today, some of perhaps the bureaucracy associated with trade facilitation, that's something happens to be a little bit top of mind for us here in the UK, starting in January 2021. I wonder why that is, with Brexit, of course, impacting the economies of the UK and Europe and many other parts of the world, not just COVID. But these kinds of tools, augmented intelligence, will make many of the everyday tasks that we do in a pretty manual way, actually they'll become creatures of standardization. They'll become creatures of digitization, with human monitoring, human insight being the only thing that makes that work. But nevertheless, those new technologies will impact many aspects of what we do. And all of that can really only happen if a lot of that information is discoverable, which is a theme that we'll come back to in a moment. But making sure that the performance, the relative performance of the organizations that you work with, whether that's as an accountant working inside a company, as an accountant in industry working with many clients, or perhaps as a regulator thinking about an entire economy, the idea of discoverability is truly one for our digital age, and we'll come back to that in a moment. What's accounting about? People have got different reasons, different ideas and reasons for going into accounting, but if you step back and look at this from a long way off, you quickly realize that accounting is about trust, and accounting and audit, the governance that sits around that, is something that is becoming much more digital and much more interconnected and very much real time. Many of us are already utilizing cloud-based accounting systems, which have real-time access to bank accounts and real-time access to invoicing and other things to facilitate real-time or close to real-time reporting of one sort or another. But that is going to become so much more important over the next decade, and many of you will be the people driving that change. The discovery of relative performance, so all kinds of business reporting, business reporting that really needs to be accessible and discoverable, again, we'll come back to that, becomes a real key, the true key perhaps, to corporate trust. Today we think about a lot of that in terms of financial statements, and financial statements really remain incredibly important as we move forward over the next decade, because in many respects they are the denominator, they are the carefully reviewed, they are the source of truth. They might provide the denominator to many other aspects of our analysis. So I'm interested in sales per square foot. I'm interested in the carbon emissions of a particular enterprise in terms of its turnover, sales. These things are, if you like, denominators of many aspects of trust and analysis as we move forward. But yes, indeed, very many aspects of ESG will become increasingly important, as will just making the KPIs that we run our businesses with more comparable and more accessible. And all of these things require certain tools, certain processes, certain governance, but in particular, perhaps, the skills that the accounting profession brings, the systematic thinking, the systems that come about as a result of that thinking, and the processes that support trust. Now, many people say, hey, XBRL and other similar digital standards, does that make everything suddenly much more trustworthy? Well, we would hope so, but not necessarily. My good friend and colleague, David Van Cannon, these days working in the US Treasury, but an important part of the XBRL standards, has always said it merely makes you able to lie, cheat, and steal at close to the speed of light. So in fact, all the controls, all of the mechanisms that ensure that reporting and transactions are trustworthy continue to be important, continue to be vital. And I think we will see over the next decade something of a battle of wits, if you like, or a battle of augmented intelligence. And one level, we might see very smart fraudsters and cyber criminals attempting to, start off the next Ponzi scheme or whatever it is. And at the same time, we will see increasingly important, increasingly clever augmented intelligence used by professional accountants, by accounting bodies like the ICAI, and indeed by the regulators, to try to ensure that just as quickly as new frauds come about, they can be captured much more rapidly than they do today. But let's not kid ourselves that all of this is suddenly perfect. So I just was throwing out 3 ideas there for you to start to think about, because you all read the press, you're all involved in all kinds of activities and professional development. You know that some of these themes are increasingly important in our everyday lives, and I hope you know that that is not so very far away. Is it 2 years away? Well, Bill Gates will tell you that no, it's not. But is this and more going to occur over the next decade? Yes, it certainly will. So let's come back to 2021 and think about, in some more concrete terms, how some of these things impact us in terms of reporting, and indeed I'll talk a little bit more concretely about XBRL. So one question that comes about in this area, and this is something that I think is particularly important, is that it's very easy to get carried away with the latest trend. Hey, I've heard of this great new fintech that's going to replace all of my accounting systems. Indeed, platforms and new ideas and new technologies, particularly in my mind, things like augmented intelligence, are going to impact many things that we do, and many of those things will operate on platforms that we will trust. But equally, those platforms can't, in my mind, work without standards, and standards and platforms will be working together. And so from our perspective, even though we are the standards camp, we're all about trying to ensure that there's a level playing field, and this information and these opportunities are accessible to everybody around the world. The reality is that a host of these platforms will be working with standards as well. So I would like you to think about the platforms and the standards that you are going to be relying on, even if you never see either the platforms and the standards, because from your perspective, you're just using your accounting package. It's just that those accounting packages are getting smarter. Those accounting packages are using platforms, they're using cloud, they're using augmented intelligence, and they're using standards. So 3 things to consider as we just close this out. The first thing is report utility. The second is report access, and the third is report discoverability. So let's go to that. Let's start with report utility. I mentioned at the beginning that there is a host of different ways that people use XBRL in different environments. I'm just going to cover the idea of corporate reports, whether it be a financial report or a sustainability report or something else. Increasingly, those are occurring utilizing artificial intelligence. Those are increasingly being used using Inline XBRL, which is an important standard within the XBRL stack and is used for reporting by all kinds of corporates, as well as by a host of business registrars increasingly. You can go and look at this. This is an example that's sitting up on the the GLIFE website. If you're not familiar with GLIFE, it is the Global Legal Entity Identifier Foundation, and GLIFE is the organization that looks after the LEI, the Legal Entity Identifier, the global way of looking at identity for individual corporates. So do go and look at their annual report, which is in Inline XBRL. This is being used by the SEC, by the Japanese FSA. It's being used across Europe as part of the new ESEF framework. It's being used by a host of business registrars, particularly around Europe today, and it's growing very, very quickly. But as you can see, this is both human and machine readable. So I've just got a P&L here, but if I hover over this, I can see, clearly this is just a picture, but if I hover over this, I can see off on the right-hand side a whole host of information about that fact. That's the XBRL doing its work. That's providing information. It tells me what the period that is. It tells me the fact that this is US dollars. It tells me the change over the period. It gives me some information down here. It tells me here's the link to the actual accounting standard. All of those kinds of metadata or definitions, the dictionary that ensures comparability, is what Inline XBRL makes accessible. And of course, this has been made accessible to us as human beings, but different systems can consume this information almost instantly. So for many kinds of performance and corporate reports, we think that this will be the key way that the world moves forward. And indeed, this particular report has something else that's very important about it. It's highly trustable. Not only does it have an LEI in it telling you what is the organization that has published this report, but it tells you exactly who and in what capacity has signed this report. This is a digitally signed report. It can't be altered. If it is altered, then those green signatures will go red if even a single bit changes on one of these reports, be that happen tomorrow or in a decade's time. So that is something that we think is an increasingly important way of getting a range of ideas across, and something that is very important to accountants and to regulators alike. These kinds of digital reports make all kinds of analytics easily accessible. This is something that one of my colleagues put together in a very short space of time, taking just a single report, this time from a Japanese company, putting it in Tableau, which is an off-the-shelf business intelligence tool, using one of the new XBRL formats, a thing called XBRL JSON. But these capabilities let you take information and use it in new and very interesting ways, and in however you want to utilize data. Analytics is what it's about. As our colleague said at the beginning, this isn't about managing all this information. This is about analyzing it and understanding it. So these capabilities make that process much, much simpler. So is this a sudden report utopia? Well, no, it's not. We need to think about accessibility, and we need to think about equality. So let's think about those just for a few minutes. If a company is producing a report, how do we know it's any good? Well, we've got all kinds of controls and governance mechanisms that hopefully ensure that that is the case. Foremost in the minds of many, of course, is the audit, and the audit is extremely important. This is a question of understanding the controls framework that sits around these reports and ensuring that they're robust, as well as ensuring that the information that comes out of those systems does reflect reality. So identifying weaknesses and errors in any of that function needs to be a continuous process. So we need a three-level feedback loop. We needed to ensure that companies receive feedback about problems from their auditors. Okay, we know the way that works today. We need to ensure that they receive feedback from their regulators. Today, that's a pretty hit and miss affair in most parts of the world. It's pretty uncommon for a private company or even a public company to have their accounts go under the microscope by a regulator, and then when they do, they might get a letter about it. Well, we're living in a digital age We're not living in the world of sampling anymore. We need to think about that in terms of continuous review by the regulator and automated feedback back to the company. And that's just as important for all of the users of those reports. They need to also be able to provide that continuous feedback back to the company. And the more feedback that the company receives, then the more they're able to enhance the way that they manage their processes and manage the quality of their reporting. This is something that is a 3-level feedback loop. And as I said, is a very important aspect of reporting in the digital age. So how does technology help in this context? Well, you've all heard of GIGO. What's GIGO? It's garbage in, garbage out. Technology and data systems in particular are only as good as the information that they receive. And there are 2 key criteria and 2 key things that both the accounting profession and regulators need to be thinking about. One of those is pretty simple. It's just data quality rules. The XBRL standards let you implement a host of data quality rules. Does the balance sheet balance? This number shouldn't be negative. That number was N. This time it's 100 N. Last time, what's going on? Why has it changed so radically? That might be legitimate or it might be an error. These are the simple human errors that creep into reports of all kinds. I've reported my shares as rupee. No, that's actually numbers of shares. It's not rupee. So these kinds of simple errors can be caught very easily by these kinds of just very straightforward digital rules. Those digital rules accompany digital reports, and they are very important. You can think about this as a league table. You want to make these reports, these checks very public. You want to make them very clear. You want to make them accessible to companies before they publish anything so that they can check them before themselves. Of review. And I was very pleased to see in the press this week the effort by ICAI around artificial intelligence and review of the financial statements that are part of the FRRB's remit. But at what level, whatever level this kind of review is occurring, whether it's being done by the profession, whether it's being done by the regulators, there are today new tools, artificial intelligence in particular, augmented intelligence in this context, which provides, again, a way of recognizing patterns that might not be obvious to the humans, and can look up at so much information all at once, again, beyond the capability of an individual human, that becomes possible. There's some very interesting work that is being done in terms of early detection of potential insolvency. That's terrific work that's happened in Denmark, which has to a certain extent being built off the very important work around artificial intelligence, looking at both structured and unstructured data. You need both to be able to compare things like, how upbeat is the CEO in their talk to analysts compared to the hard facts of their financial statements. Some of these things might provide ticks and indicators about issues, but it can be much simpler than that, just looking at the text of a financial statement and comparing it against numbers. This is work that is being led in Japan around bankruptcy detection, and is the kind of thing that is very important. But just understanding errors. Hey, these guys didn't use the right accounting standard. That stuff's vital as well. So all of these digital tools to go along with these digital reports are going to be an important part of trust and governance in the future. Now, all of that is irrelevant if you don't make this information accessible. So unless data is easily accessible, it can't be used and it can't be improved. So one of the reasons that I wanted to show you and encourage you to explore the world of Inline XBRL is Inline XBRL is just a web page. There's nothing clever about that. It's just a web page. It's in HTML, and there happens to be some extra tags that provide that sit around each fact that you're trying to get across to users. That process is web native, and if you publish those reports on web pages, then they are accessible to all, and that's a pretty simple and straightforward approach. Clearly, it helps to have an index, and clearly regulators and the profession should be thinking about this feedback loop. They should be thinking about providing a feedback mechanism in these modern systems, because these are the kinds of systems that are going to drive continuous reporting, are going to drive the kinds of restructuring and rethinking of financial transactions using things like fiat currency. This is going to be a real-time world, and real-time worlds need real-time access and real-time discovery. So providing that feedback mechanism to the company, the auditor, and indeed the vendors that are involved in this process, because, you know, software vendors make mistakes too. All of these things need to be considered. And lastly, and I'm sure I'm rabbiting on, so I would like to just lastly spend a little bit of time on report discovery, because creating trust is not enough, or perhaps better put, creating trust is impossible unless you make information accessible and discoverable. So access to reports of all kinds needs to be simple, and it needs to be ready for a digital age. So there are barriers to discovery that we put up in all of our systems around the world, not necessarily thinking about that next decade. So this is perhaps most focused on policymakers and regulators, and we're always happy to discuss that. But I'd encourage you to think about identity. Things like the LEI and internationally accessible identity is a great approach. Think about translation. One of the great advantages of XBRL is that you can produce any of those facts. We were looking at a report earlier that was, talking about something on an income statement. Any of those facts can appear in as many languages as you like. So providing that information to make it accessible, north, south, east, west, somebody else around the country or around the world becomes much simpler, and we'd encourage you to consider that. But these ideas about enhanced trust is something that's central to the economy. So one of the considerations actually does go to the business registrar. Most business registrars around the world charge companies to file something, and then they charge people to access those files. Considering that the information about private companies, this is something of the social contract. You get limited liability as long as you provide a certain amount of information about your operations. Now, the byproduct of that is trust about that organization. Trust is the lifeblood of the accounting profession. Now, that trust function does break down if that information isn't readily accessible. So there's a balance here to be held between, should I be charging, and that helps running a business registrar for information, or does the economic impact of enhanced trust about individual companies to help them with their credit score, to help them with capital formation, to help them with supply chains, discovering new customers, discovering new suppliers, and building trust into that process, could that be better served simply by making that information accessible? So understanding that is something that's largely a policy question, but it's an important one for the digital age. So to sum up, at XBRL International, we are very much focused on the future. We are focused on some of those things that are coming down the pipe over the next decade. We've been developing new standards to assist in the use of granular data, which is a whole nother subject and one we'd be happy to return to another day. We've been looking at new standards for security and identity. Those green ticks that you saw before, they're going to be an important part of reporting in the future. New standards to facilitate analytics and make that process simpler and more accessible to everybody. And we are always here to support both the regulator and the reporting professional. Digitization, as we've seen, accelerated incredibly over the last year during the pandemic, is key to success in the next decade. And it is key to not just corporate success, but national success. And it is down to policymakers and accounting bodies and the like to consider what are the right steps and the right building blocks to put into place to make sure that the country and each company has access to some of this as they go forward. And then lastly, all of this innovation can coincide to create that significant advantage. So now is the time to be thinking of some of those things, and we urge you to be thinking digital as you think about governance and as you think about structured data, two key platforms for the coming decade. I hope that has given you some things to think about on a Friday evening, and I hope that you'll enjoy this journey going forward, creating trust, creating competitive advantage in a new and digital world. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, John. It was indeed a fantastic, 360-degree view of the entire XBRL thought process and the structured data concept. You will be happy and also equally, satisfied to know that, the people who are participating in today's program are from different parts of the world. Let me just share the names of those countries which are actually participating today. President sir, compliments to you as well for thinking through this kind of thought process, which has actually excited people across the globe to participate in that large number. We have people from Australia, Oman, England, South Africa, Netherlands, Egypt, Dubai, Nepal, United States, Kenya, Estonia, Senegal, Ireland, Germany, France, Singapore, Bahrain, Switzerland, Nigeria, and Hong Kong. I think this is the first of its kind which has actually made this global impact. So first of all, I would like to thank our President Atul Gupta ji to think through this entire thought process to get this entire this entire discussion in one place. And more importantly, I think the way you have taken it, one suggestion I have, John, from a very simple point of view, is that, can we make certain things very simple for understanding? Because always has been a thought process, even for me, it was a thought process that, XBRL is a little complex thing, but you made it so simple. You made it so simple and you made it relevant with regards to the current and the future times to come. And more importantly, if we are able to just create some small videos, which actually can give us that small tidbits kind of thing, which gives a message so that this is the kind of information which is going to come out. This is kind of, decision making can be taken care. And you have rightly put forward the most important part when you talk about data, and data is linked with security and more importantly with privacy. And when you are actually collating this data into one particular level, there is something which need to be more taken care is with regards to the data security. I really thank you for giving your insightful, keynote address. And more importantly, I think this is the first time I'm hearing about XBRL in such a detailed manner, which is giving in so much of new thoughts. You talked about multiple things, whether it is, audit to regulator, regulator to user feedback model, which I think is the crux. When you talk about data, usability, but I think the most important part is the feedback, which we need to really look into. Without that, if I'm not able to get the right benefit out of it and right purpose is not being served, I think there is something which is going wrong. That feedback mechanism is one of the most important ones. So this simple one is going to be interesting. You want me to ask question now? I have a couple of questions for you to discuss, or you let us finish.
Please, whatever you like.
Yeah, so I'll just ask you two important questions which has come to me. One is from a person by name Subir from Kolkata, India. Can the auditor, depending on the structured data of other agencies, form the basis of his qualification and opine on the financial statements of the auditee?
Can the auditor rely on third-party data? Is that the point?
Yeah, that's the point. To form an opinion for his auditee.
So it's a very cutting-edge question. And there are a number of people on the call who are far better qualified to describe the legalities and the standards that cover this particular question. But this point about the trustworthiness of information that might come from a third party is a critical one, because we are going to be thinking much more in terms not just of direct connections with a particular counterparty, but direct connections with entire supply chains. And for supply chains to work, we need to be able to trust that information. So whether an auditor can rely on that information today legally and in terms of the the rules of the of accounting and of the audit standards, pardon me, I can't tell you, especially in India, I can't tell you, but I can tell you that this kind of level of trust is going to be a vital part of the future. So I think it's a very perceptive question, and indeed a productive area for research and work.
Very, very rightly said. And now there's a follow-on question on this particular thing from my side. With this kind of data, which is getting, in a total different format and structure, which is going to be useful, do you think there is a time which is going to come where the accounting standards, whether it is IFRS, US GAAP, Indian standards, or auditing standards, and including the reporting standards which are there, is undergoing to go change?
So in the XBRL world, within the standards, we say that there's only one thing we know about accounting standards and reporting standards of all kinds, and that is that they do change. Indeed, they have to change and they have to modernize to reflect our societies and reflect our realities. So we do know that these things change. We also, and I think this is an important but related point, we know that there's an awful lot of similarity in reporting, but we talked about all the countries around that are represented on the call today, many of which are using different reporting standards and different reporting frameworks. Can I rely on cash being cash across different accounting standards? Well, probably can. Can I rely on a repo being the same thing across different countries? Probably not. And there is a real global challenge, somewhat met by the private sector, somewhat met by the regulators at a national and at a global level, to really assist with comparability and improve the comparability, and therefore, to a large extent, the trustworthiness of information, across national boundaries. That's a long-term effort, but it is the almost inevitable byproduct of our global economies.
So one question which again is there with regards to this discussion is, when you are going to get the information which is going to be more comparable, do you think the global financial frauds which are getting impacted, coming up, which are getting reported on a regular basis, will there be any value add with this structured data?
I think that structured data is, and it's not just XBRL, it's other transactional information and other things of the sort, is a key part of the control framework that can reduce the risk of some of these frauds. It's an awful thing, but to a certain extent, the reason that the Twin Towers came down in the United States during the awful 9/11 attacks was sort of a failure of imagination. Who could have thought that that would have occurred? Some of the cyber attacks that we're beginning to see that infiltrate some tool that is used by some developer in writing their own software, these are highly imaginative attacks, and we are going to have to become more imaginative in the way we respond to them and the way that we can control them. There are aspects of that that relate to data. There are aspects of that relate to other kinds of technologies, but I think this is a question of people of goodwill coming together and ensuring that they are building systems that are robust, secure, and that they are thinking about these issues throughout. And as we increasingly put our wealth and our time and our effort into data rather than into oil, these questions are only going to become more and more important.
Yep. Thank you, John. I think just let us wait for more questions to come. There are a couple of them, but I just thought I'll pick up which are more relevant and share with you. And really thankful to you to join us today. And we request you to kindly continue if it is possible and you don't have any other prior commitment, because a person from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and our senior council member, MP Vijay Kumar, who is the chairman of the Accounting Standard Board. He's actually going to talk about certain very interesting aspects from a role of structured data in the ESG group, which is one of the very important global groups which is there. And really, but the inputs what you have given is something very, very interesting. And more importantly, I would like to say is to make it more simple, let us actually try to create some small videos or might be some kind of messages which people can pick up very quick, because it's very important, because people get worried on the front that that is a little complex, but you made it so simple. And I think it's going to be more interesting. And this video, when it is going to be put on the ICAI website as well as the YouTube, I think you can continuously watch the number of people who are going to add and view this videos on a continuing basis. So thank you very much for joining us. And I welcome MP Vijay Kumar ji, who is a single council member and chairman of the Accounting Standard Board, to come and share his views with all our members who are attending the program. Over to you, MP Vijay. Sir, unmute.
Thanks, Daya. How much time do I have? You have to be unmute now.
As per your convenience.
As per your convenience.
Okay, I'll try to do in 20-25 minutes. Okay, fine. Thank you. So thanks, John, for accepting the invite of the Institute and your fellow board member and our Honorable President Atul Kumar Guptaji's invite to be present here. It was a pleasure listening to you last 40 minutes and get a very simple understanding of what XBRL is and XBRL International's role and the way you're looking at the world approach adoption of XBRL more, extensible business reporting language. Just a couple of points before I can get to the topic, John. We are very thankful to XBRL International for having our president on the board of XBRL International. And I'm sure that he will bring lots of insights from India's experience around XBRL International and contribute to the world.
We are delighted to have him. Thank you.
In fact, 2017, I recall, if my memory serves me right, I think I saw his tour report of participating in XBRL International Conference. I think it was in Paris. He had submitted a detailed tour report after that conference as to what were the key takeaways there. And since then, he has driven a lot of agenda towards using XBRL filings for more analytical purposes. In fact, India has been sort of a global leaders or one of the early adopters of XBRL. In fact, Institute started its journey around XBRL way back in 2007 and set up a separate legal entity in 2010. And it has taken on board all the other regulators in the country, SEBI, Central Bank, Reserve Bank, and others as well, in the formulation of the same. And just for information, I'm not sure if other jurisdictions have this requirement. India is probably the only jurisdiction where entities which have a capital, a paid up capital of almost $700,000 are mandatorily required to file financial statements in XBRL, which means almost all of the companies in today's context, paid up capital of 700,000 is nothing. And all companies, which means all companies' financial information is available with the regulators in XBRL form. And whether it is listed, unlisted, and irrespective of the industry to which they belong to. Of course, the central bank and the capital market regulator and the insurance regulator also use XBRL quite extensively. And in India, as you know, it's all about business reporting language. In the global arena, it's all around IFRS taxonomy, and XBRL is quite popular. In India, we have the equivalent of the same. And as the amendments keep happening, there's so much of competencies we have developed within the institute and the country that we are in a position to develop our own taxonomies, even to capture the non-financial information. So when it comes to the annual report, you have the director's report, MD, and all of that also. We take the lead in terms of making available in XBRL format. And as you mentioned almost at the end of your talk, thanks again to President's initiative, Vice President's guidance, and the Chairman of FRRB. We are now on the verge of developing a model, an AI-based tool for analyzing financial statements which are filed on the XBRL mode, so that the compliance with the accounting and audit standards can be identified through the machine itself. So as a regulator who has a very important role of oversight on the profession and to improve quality of financial reporting and give more confidence to the users of financial statements, that's a landmark step, and full credit to the President, Vice President, and the Chairman, Vice Chairman of the FRRB. I'm sure all this experience our President will be able to bring into the XBRL board. And as an institute, we have been very committed. We are very committed to contribute towards global good reporting practices. So thank you for that. And greetings to our Vice President, Nihar Jambusaryaji, for his introductory remarks. And he's a pillar of governance, and is one of those who has practiced highest standards of governance. I have had the opportunity of working with him closely last 5 years in various committees. And between President, who is largely involved in technology and data, and governance driven by the Vice President, we have a combined topic today, and I will try to speak on that for the next 16, 17 minutes. As this particular presentation I would be making, all of these views are my individual views. They have not been formally discussed at the Accounting Research Foundation, who is the host of this event, or the XBRL India board. So these are my individual views, and they should not be constituted as views of the institute. This is a fairly busy slide, but I'll use it for setting the context. And these are all the buzzwords which all of us keep listening. And I would like to talk 30, 40 seconds just to set the context, so that you get an insight of what I'm going to speak over the remaining time. Most of the participants here are either from the audit practitioner community or in industry. And my experience, I have been in practice for a fairly long time, and then in industry as well. I have found that if there is one person who's the owner of data, custodian of data, and people trust the data comes from, it is the accounting professional. As far as the practitioners are concerned, each of the clients they are engaged with, whether small, large, everyone is now on their path of digital transformation, and the best person who can actually guide the businesses, whether small or large, in that journey of digital transformation is the accountant in practice. Because if there is one person who understands the business and who understands the source of data and the relevance of data, and who can understand the technologies which are evolving, it is the accountant who can connect it to the business. And for all of the accountants who are listening in this particular conference, so well conceptualized by Daya, and compliments to him for having conceptualized it so nicely. This particular insight, what is important is how I can make this a significant contribution to the clientele and an area of practice. let me try attempt two things, and I will try to avoid speaking whatever John had spoken. Let me begin with defining two things. What constitutes data structure? It's all about the data organization, data management, the storage format, which will enable accessing the same and modifying the same. That's data structure. When it comes to data governance, it's a system of decision rights and accountabilities for information related processes executed as per agreed upon models which describe who can take actions with what information and when and under what circumstances. In fact, I heard the vice president talking about data is the new oil, and the president talking about water. In fact, I was just recollecting the 31st of December 2020, the last day of the year. And an important development was that Mr. Zhang Shen of China, who is identified as the water king, his private net worth is $78 billion, overtaking Mukesh Ambani, who is largely identified with oil, apart from technology now, who is about $77 billion. So water is at $78 billion and oil at $77 billion. Maybe there's a message in it for all of us. Now, as far as the data is concerned, a couple of very important points to understand is that we have what is called structured data and unstructured data. And as auditors, in fact, one of the members had asked a question through Daya to John on the ability to rely on information which you get from third-party sources, which is a structured data. So we have structured data in different forms within an organization, which meets the definition which I mentioned a little while ago. But look at the huge volume of unstructured data, transactions or communications of transactions with customers, chats which are happening, notes which get exchanged, online exchange over the social media, surveys which are done, emails which are done, voice transcriptions, all of these constitute unstructured data. And between structured data and unstructured data, structured data in very simplistic form is what can be displayed in rows, columns, and relational database, whereas unstructured database is what does not fit that kind of a structure. And as per Gartner's study of the total data which is there, what is structured data is just about 20%, and the unstructured data which is available is about 80% is the quantum of unstructured data. And let's understand, it is our ability to move the unstructured data into structured data. And the more we are able to add here, the better the insights one would get for business decision making. This is a slide again from Gartner. And this slide shows, and just look at the 2 decades, the volume of unstructured data which is going up. Structured data has increased to some extent, what is captured through ERPs and other accounting and other applications, but the volume of unstructured data is huge. The ability of an organization to move the unstructured data to a structured format and consequently use that for gaining insights, knowledge, and thereby wisdom for business strategies and execution makes the key. I'll leave this slide deck behind, and hence I'm not going through every slide. So why data needs to be structured? Reasons, what I just articulated, but beyond that, all of us are familiar that we have the data privacy regulations or data protection regulations. In EU, European Union, it's already in place. In India, a similar law is about to hit the road anytime soon. And if an organization has to take responsibility for data, it's very important that we have a good governance mechanism to have data in as much structured a form as possible. And organizations, as we know, have started to rely more and more on data analytics to help optimize operations and drive business decision making. For an audience like this, for all accountants, we all know the very popular saying that what gets measured gets monitored. What gets measured gets monitored. If you're unable to measure, there's no way you can monitor, and there's no way you can improve upon the same. And for this, it's very important to have data in as structured a manner as possible. Without effective data structure and a governance mechanism, data inconsistencies across different systems. I'm sure there are many people here who are from industry and the others who are in practice. All of them would have come across n number of situations, numerous situations where you get multiple information, you get different data points relating to the same thing from different sources. And the moment you get different data points relating to the same thing from different sources, your confidence in it comes down and consequently impacts decision making. So what's very important is to have data as structured as possible with a good governance mechanism so that data can be consistent and it can be trustworthy. And for data governance, what's important is good people, process, technology, PPT as we call, have an owner identified. The data should be accessible, accessibility rules defined, security is extremely important, quality of data, garbage in is garbage out, as all of us know, and all of this eventually translates to knowledge based on which business decisions are taken. And data governance structure is also very important for regulatory compliance as well. Now, as far as structured data goes, there's some high-level governing principles. First and foremost, it should be transparent. It should not be something which is not easily accessible to all. It should be auditable. There should be accountability for whatever is there as data. Responsibilities need to be clearly defined, and everything to be a trustworthy data. Checks and balances are very important. Standardization improves the way data can be effectively used, and a good chain management structure. And when it comes to a governance structure, it's important to have a steering committee. And I would strongly encourage all organizations, particularly mid-size and above. I don't think it's viable to do it for a small organization, but for every mid-size and large organizations, including accounting firms of reasonable size, there is huge amount of responsibility around data. Important to have a steering committee of the heads of the organization, a data architect who understands how data can be stored in a structured format and fitting it into the data policies of the organization, a data owner, so owner relating to customer side data, owner relating to production data, owner relating to HR data. You need to have those owners, and you need to have stewardship around data who will ensure ethical practices and data analysts to support the effective use of data. Good governance structure for structured data helps inform decision making, as we know, regulatory compliance. It aids data security. Absence of a good governance structure will weaken your data security. All of us understand the importance of data security. In fact, the moment we whatever information we got around WhatsApp, almost everybody started moving to other applications. So we all understand the importance of data security, important to have accountability, availability of information subject to definition of rights of people who can have access to, and measurability. All of these are important. Let me come to the concluding part on linking data with environment, social and governance, ESG, society and governance. Structured data along with artificial intelligence. Daya gave an example at the start when he talked about the session. So data along with artificial intelligence helps handle ESG compliance, organizations' compliances towards environment, voluntary and regulatory requirement. In fact, organizations who comply requirements of environment only for regulatory are unlikely to be sustainable organizations. So it's important that people walk a step more than what the regulatory requirements are and be conscious about the environment. Data surrounding the contributions to society. I'm very happy to say that in India is one of those very few countries where we have mandatory corporate social responsibility. And we have seen the experience of the last 7 years where organizations have competed with each other in terms of implementation of quality initiatives in contributing towards the society. And during the pandemic as well, organizations have walked that extra bit in terms of contributing towards the society and help governance as well. So a structured data combined with artificial intelligence for effective use of the data will help an organization towards meeting its ESG policies. It also creates a virtual loop which will help, given the insights which you get from your engagement with the environment and the society and the governance you practice. It helps setting goals, having benchmarks, and making course corrections for reinforcing sustainability. And in India, probably we are again here one of the very few countries where we are now almost on the verge of setting up a social stock exchange. I'll not be surprised if there are some big announcements on this in the Union Finance Minister's speech on 1st February. So we'll have a social stock exchange, and we will have non-profit organizations listed on the social stock exchange, where all of them will talk about the extent of their initiatives towards the society and the way outcome is measured. The value of each of these entities will be a direct function of the outcome they are able to produce. And this will help organizations to integrate the ESG policies into the business strategy and performance as well. And organizations cannot survive independent of having policies around ESG. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs has also brought out a business responsibility requirement, BRR as we call, as part of National Voluntary Guidelines for improved governance. So there again, we have required responsibilities towards the environment as well as society. So insights on what's happening, all of that will help better deployment of resources in this. Resources are scarce, particularly for a developing country like India. The more effectively the resources can be used, the more is the outcome which can be generated. And through having structured information, we can empower ESG to make a real difference in the world it's meant to be. And for the ESG leaders, we do have some challenges around structured data. A variety of sources of data are available. The ability to analyze the data, the velocity of data, the speed at which the data keeps changing. And most of these initiatives are covered largely by the media and the kind of social media activists who are there. So velocity of information which is there, the volume is also pretty high. So handling all of these is an important challenge for ESG leaders in various in the respective organizations. But the more structured the data and better governance practice around data will help address these three V's: variety of data, velocity of data, and the volume of data. Thank you all for your patient listening, and my sincere thanks to President, Vice President for the opportunity to be here today and participate. And thanks to Daya as well for moderating this. And thanks, John. Once again, it was a pleasure listening to you today. Thank you.
Thank you, MPV. I think so effectively covered, I think, the entire structure which you have taken through. I think I'm your student. I will always love to continue as your student, as always. And the kind of thoughtfulness and the kind of flow you have taken through is giving us lot and lot of such information. I have a couple of questions, but before that, I'll just try to take and put it in India context with regards to what the structured data means. I think it is a very good opportunity when a person like Mr. Atul Gupta, who is the president of the institute and also the global board member of XBRL International, that this thought process of data that need to be put into a structured manner, rightly said by MPV, that 80% of the data is unstructured and only 20% is structured. I think when you look at from an India perspective, there is something more and very interesting to go through. When you talk about 29 states of this country, which is actually having different language, the people look different, everything is different. Whether you eat different, you behave different, you wear different, everything is different. But only thing which is common in this country is, I think, ultimately going to be the data. These all states which are going to come together with regards to when you talk about governance will undoubtedly be attached with transparency. And the kind of information which is being passed on at every state level, every city level, every town level, every village level, is the kind of collections which are happening at different levels. The most important part is the nomenclature. Fortunately, XBRL follows the concept of taxonomy. And taxonomy particularly talks about the tagging which is particularly used. In whichever state or whatever activity which I get in, all my data or all my nomenclatures are very structured. It's only somewhere it is put in a different perspective, but the meaning of the same of that letters are same. So the most important part when you look at from the government perspective, I think we have huge number of central government agencies. We have huge number of state government agencies, and all work in a different style. All were actually introduced for a social cause, but over a period of time, the profitability has been one of the important factor. And the kind of activity which are again closed end approach, where the government doesn't allow any other organizations to actually operate on, or the government is open-ended with regards to allowing everyone to participate. I think that kind of data, whether you talk about mining, whether you talk about Panchayati Raj, which is the village level, John, activities which are being done, whether it is education, whether it is hospitals, whether it is basic distribution of money for the upliftment of poor, and most importantly, the financial inclusion has been one of the most important part of this nation's a different new thought process altogether. Financial inclusion has actually taken India to a total different level, which actually ensured that by giving additional benefits, a lot of people who are not in the financial system have actually come into the financial system. And more importantly, the money which was not available for those people has actually become available to those people. And the quality of life, the quality of business, the quality of activity which is being done is actually coming out to be different. When we are talking about only a financial statement, the concept is different. But when I talk about financial transactions or the governance perspective, the rightly said by MPV, when there is availability, there should be availability of data. Usability is again important, but the most important part is accessibility of data. Till the time it is not structured data, the accessibility becomes very difficult because it is not traceable or feelable. So the point is, if we are able to drive this thing at the national level, the growth of the country, not only India, but globally, is going to go in a total different direction. I think if we are underestimating, the language XBRL is something which is going to be at a people at large. I'm talking about. If anyone thinks it is a very exclusive thing, but actually it can be made a very populist kind of a measure which can be actually adopted by the global or the country specific transactions or activity. So many things have been discussed today. I think this is just a beginning. We need to continuously do this kind of activity. And the most important part is the government, the regulators are the most important people who have to actually participate in this entire discussion. Because the right to collect that information is with them. I can only have a restricted access or permissions to do certain things. But the government, the regulators have the full access. The moment we are actually going to track this entire thing and connect these gaps, it is going to take us to a total different level. And India being India, we have seen the life of pager only for a year or two, and the mobile adoption and the data usage being one of the world's largest country with regards to use of data. From 2013, when we were 150th position, today India stands number one with the kind of, just imagine the data which is available for a livelihood of an uneducated, a very low-lying person also is becoming relevant. As you rightly said, MPV sir, in your entire presentation with regards to that bunch of information which is unstructured, just imagine if that is just putting into a particular format. Who can be a better person to read those financial numbers than a chartered accountant? I think this is a time where we need to really understand this. You had one question, what is robotic process automation? Robotic and automation can be a scientific or an engineer's job, but the process is chartered accountant's job. You have rightly said it. And there are many such things. I have actually noted so many points, but most of them have been covered in all your presentation. I'm actually thinking, why only SEBI? Why only MCA? Why only RBI? I think the Panchayati Raj, hospital, education, land records, tax collections at the lowest level, money distribution which is happening, loan collection, loan distribution, everything actually can be covered in a such beautiful manner that the decision making of any business can actually qualitatively increase if I have the right data. And the most important part, when you talk about data privacy and data secrecy, the most important thing is if the government collects this data, right? And more importantly, secures it in a right platform. And when I want to purchase or I want to use the data, I am able to track the person who is actually collecting that data and using the data. There is a lot that can be done by the government. And we are fortunate that we have a Prime Minister who is talking about Digital India, digital initiatives, which is on a total different platform. I think lot can be discussed on a continuous model, and we can take each piece separately to discuss and deliberate how qualitatively the countries, the states can collect this entire information in a right manner. Atul sir, we only have one request which is there from your side is, you being on the international board of XBRL, and which is actually talking about the thought-provoking ideas which have been given. You are again very well connected with the government. Certain initiatives, if we are able to connect with the government and take this thing forward, XBRL India is going to go in a different direction, and this will become a case study for XBRL International. So I would like to listen from you, might be for a minute or two, of a kind of thought which you can throw with regards to usage of the structured data.
Thank you, Devbhai. And as being rightly explained and deliberated by both the distinguished speakers, the CEO XBRL International, our own John Turner, and our own Central Council member MP Vijay Kumar, that when we are talking about the structured data vis-a-vis the governance, it's a completely forward-looking approach, and how this structured data can be useful is certainly, as you are talking about a case study, that will certainly serve the purpose for which we are all discussing here. So whether it is the environment we are talking about, we are sustainability we are talking about, the growth we are talking about, looking into towards the 2031, which the John talked about. So it is very important for all of us to move towards that direction, that how we can do our little steps towards achieving that the country as a India as a country, having the more structured data available as you are looking for, that with the government, with the state government and the national government, and then the data is being used, analyzed and used for the decision making. As I mentioned you in my initial talks, that when we are talking about the governance, it is not the corporate governance we are talking about. We are talking about the 44,000 feet of the governance, which includes the n number of things, not only the corporate governance per se, which is the normally being coined or assumed by the different stakeholders. So even if you have to have the inclusive growth in the country, you have to serve. I can give you one example. In India, for the structured data, even John will like to hear that we are talking about this cooking gas, distribution of the cooking gas at the country level, or transferring the subsidy directly to the bank accounts of the various farmers and the low income group by the government. So earlier it was a process which was practically a manual process. A lot of intermediaries were there, and actually the beneficiaries are getting the benefit or not was a question. But under the aegis of the present government, with the vision to have the more structured approach. So first I will talk about the structured approach, that the approach was structured, that let us move towards the structural reform. And the structural reform, I will say, motivate them to have a structured data. So by having that data in a structured way, in a, I will say, comprehensive data, which can be uniformly analyzed by the different stakeholders. Today, it become the, I believe, the one of the largest project across the globe, when you have the millions of customers on the cooking gas and the direct transfer of subsidy to the low income group. So that is the again example which is there. And now this particular data, for example, the DBT or the cooking gas distribution, can be further analyzed. So that will give the, I will say, the different kind of a perspective for the future, that how we plan our schemes in the times to come. So as you rightly being discussed by John, MPV and yourself, I believe that the first of all, the approach, the structured approach, that approach towards this structured data, and then creating the environment of obtaining the structured data, and then you analyzing. So I was just discussing with John in the one of the board meeting on the same line, that we need to develop some kind of a case study, some motivational stories, some kind of examples, that even in a coming international conference of the XBRL, I propose that we should have these kind of talks, sessions specifically, which can be a motivating factor and the learning curve for the international community and the regulators. Over to you there.
Thank you, President Sir. I think you have rightly put forward all those ideas the government is actually following. And John, you can actually imagine the volume which is going to be, witnessed by this country is going to be unimaginable. And the kind of case studies which can come out of this is going to be further unimaginable. But one interesting question which I received for you, John. There is one very, very nice. Now we are going to the question answer session, and we have only 5 to 7 minutes left. We'll take 2 or 3 questions and quickly we'll close it. Whether XBRL shall take us to a regime where there would be at least compliance required, so as to save so much of human hours. And I think this is one person who what it means is, in the regime of XBRL, the human hours are going to be saved. Are we going to go towards that?
Sure. So this process of structuring information can occur in different levels and involve different processes. So it's very easy to do it in a very manual way. Hey, I've gone through all the things that I've been doing for the last 50 years, and I have my report. Oh, I need to make that XBRL. Okay, I'm going to have a very manual process in making that happen. That's okay. Of course, that's more prone to error, and it takes more time, not less time. So we need people to think about this intelligently and ways that impact them in a way that's positive, because we want people to be spending more time analyzing and less time preparing. So therefore, think about the process, think about the systems that make that occur. And what we talk about is going further up the supply chain, the information supply chain inside the company. So if you can tag information at the point that it is created, and then aggregate that inside your organization, and then just provide that aggregated data, then that can be done system to system with very little or zero effort on the part of the workers in that organization. That will give you higher quality information, almost certainly, if the systems are being correctly developed and managed, and it will lower your burden and improve the amount of time you have to analyze. So that's the goal. But like everything, this is a human process and a social construct. It takes a bit of time and a bit of thought and a bit of experience.
I agree. I agree to a greater, yeah.
There, just to add, when John mentioned that even in a compliance environment, because one of maybe the queries is one of the chartered accountant and loaded with a lot of compliances, so he may be having this question. So certainly the answer is yes. Why I'm saying so? Because there are the global studies and the innovations which are happening. Even I am aware about one of the international conference of the XBRL I attended, and wherein a concept called RegTech was being discussed, wherein they are trying to merge the various regulatory returns in a single kind of things. So what because you will see that in case you are filing the different compliance returns, there are the 30% data which is common in all the regulatory compliances. So you have only the 70% data, and even out of the 70, again there will be the 30%, 40% data which can be derived out from the one or the other regulatory returns, because that is common in nature. So just computers speaking each other. So likewise, if the data is speaking each other, so practically what will happen, the 70% data can be derived either through the API, or that is not required at all because that is common per se. So in case we move into that direction, at least our thought process, then certainly I can believe that as mentioned by John, that you will be looking only for 30% data, and rest the time which will be saved can be used more effectively in the analysis of the data as compared to the preparation or the submission of the data.
I agree. Basically, fortunately, this government has moved towards looping of all the laws, whether it is income tax, GST, labor laws, and SME compliances. Today, extraction of data by putting one single thing, which is either in individual case Aadhaar number, or might be in case of a company or anything, is basically PAN card. The data is just getting pulled out, and the name, details, information is actually going through the entire thing. But the next question is very, very important. Very important. I think this is a grassroots question which is there. This will need some hands-on experience for people to actually adopt. Today, people are listening to the concept. I think we need to go to the grassroots realities, John, and see how we can actually create a hands-on, small case studies where people actually sit and start working on. I think that will make our day different. So I'll first ask MPV from India perspective how he sees that with regards to hands-on experience on small case studies, and then I would like to understand from you on the global perspective.
As far as the use cases are concerned, there are plenty in India. Of course, that's the barrel. And you're also a board member of XBRL India. And you know that we are looking at how XBRL-based information can be effectively used by various stakeholders. We are now making a beginning at FRRB, Financial Reporting Review Board, where we are looking at using AI for reading through the XBRL-based financial statements and identify areas of non-compliances, etc., in discharge of our regulatory function. And happy to share that SEBI and RBI are actively XBRL, in fact, and they have been doing it over a period of time. So I only see it increasing. And what I actually like in XBRL is, contrary to the general understanding, it is financial reporting. It's actually covers both financial and non-financial reporting. So it's basically business reporting. So non-financial reporting is in its nascent stages, whether you call it integrated report or sustainable report, all of that. So I think as we develop taxonomies around those reporting, XBRL will become even more widely used. I think we need to give it that time, and I'm very confident we are trading in the right path.
Thank you, MPV. And anything from your side, John? How do you think that the hands-on experience can be given to those people who are interested? Like, might be we come out with a kind of certification or something like that?
So thank you very much for the question. There's, I think, 3 points to make. The first is that the reality is that XBRL covers a pretty complicated sphere of human endeavor. Accounting has been around for 500 years, and there are aspects of that, as we all know, that are pretty complicated. And business reporting of other kinds, ESG reporting, there are some pretty complicated aspects to that. So it's difficult to get away from the fact that there are parts of this that, you need to spend a bit of time studying, and that's okay. But if you really want to understand that, there are plenty of technical resources available for you to understand it at a technical level. Here we are right in front of me. Just this week, we received the 4th edition of the XBRL book by my friend Ghislaine Fournet. But that's for engineers. That's for data scientists. It's not for it's not for the accounting practitioner. Accounting practitioners largely are going to need tools of one sort or another. There are lots of tools, at least 200 tools, many of which come from India. Some of are focused on the domestic market. Many are serving international markets. There are 70 countries in which XBRL is used around the world, and India, I think, is servicing many of those countries. So grabbing some of those tools, there are some open source tools as well, is one way of learning these things. But there's a new mechanism which might make this process simpler for many people. So there are 2 new specifications that are about to become recommendations in the coming months called XBRL CSV and XBRL JSON. These are 2 new formats for reports, which accountants can certainly get their heads around. XBRL CSV is Excel with some important metadata backing, but that's not important. It's simple stuff to get your head around. And JSON equally is a simpler thing to get around. There is a new foundation course that is underway and will be accessible starting in April, assuming we get all the relevant approvals. But that may well be another way of coming to this question, and we're talking to Mr. President about ways of making sure that's easily deliverable to members of ICAI. So that's something that we look forward to doing. But I think getting your hands dirty and experimenting with some of these things, that is the best approach, especially for younger members of the profession that are coming to this afresh.
Yep. Thank you, John. I think we are almost on the end, and it's really a great evening. Rather, I can say I actually made a right choice by canceling my trip and to be part of this session. And really excited after listening to you. It's so I'm going to take all your contact coordinates from President and ensure that I'm connected with you, because this data excites me for some reason. And might be, if this has been put in a right perspective, it's going to make a whole lot of difference. And there is a lot of young, battalion which is available to ensure that this are being really achieved in a right sense, because more of the traditional practices are actually there with the senior members, but the youngsters actually can support by ensuring that they go align with them and ensure that whatever the data requirement is there, that can be done in a right manner. So really thankful to you. First of all, let me first thank John for joining us today, giving so much of time. And really, I think this is first of its kind, an idea given by President Atul Gupta ji and the board, XBRL International Board member, Atul Gupta ji, I'll say that way, who's actually instigated a thought, and we ensure that this program happens. And I think this is a unique program which we are doing, and this is just a beginning. Thank you very much for being a keynote speaker and a chief guest to address all our members. I think this recorded information will be the benchmark to start with. I also thank our President Atul Gupta ji, who's been a thoughtful person in this entire discussion. He's on the phone because always he's tied up with all the ministry calls and all. So he's engaged with that. So thanks to him and giving the new idea to the profession with regards to XBRL. And more importantly, ably supported and guided by our Vice President, who's always been, as rightly put by MPV sir, digital and a governance man. We have two people who are actually sitting on the left and right side, which is balancing the vehicle of ICAI very effectively. And the most important person, the driver who's sitting there on the other side of the screen, MP Vijay Kumar, who's actually been a person with accounting standards, auditing standards, and more importantly, now he's been part and very important person to drive the forensic standards in my committee, Digital Accounting and Assurance Board. And I'm only a learner. This is just a beginning of my learning. And I'm really excited to be part of this entire discussion and look forward for more and more engagements. And John, we are going to bother you. There's no doubt about it. And more importantly, I say you with one conviction that India is the biggest market for XBRL. That's the only thing which will excite you to come regularly to India and be part of the entire discussion. And Mr. Atul Gupta being on the international board will make a whole lot of difference. Thank you very much. And I thank the entire office, the audience who have been really patient in the entire discussion. And, we have made it possible. This is the beginning, as I said, and it is going to continue. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, President sir. Thank you, John. Thank you, MPV sir.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.